Welcome to Gideon's Promise, the podcast with Jonathan Rapping. In the landmark 1963 decision Gideon v. Wainwright, the U.S. Supreme Court unanimously ruled every person accused of a crime in America must be provided a lawyer, regardless of their ability to pay. This podcast is about the people that uphold that promise, public defenders. These dedicated lawyers give voice to 80% of the people thrown into the system, and yet in the national discussion regarding justice reform, public defenders are largely overlooked. This show centers public defenders in that conversation. We will explore the critical role public defenders play in addressing a wide range of issues facing marginalized communities with subject matter experts, key opinion leaders, and people impacted by the American criminal legal system. Listen as a community of advocates discuss their work to strengthen public defenders and transform public defense. I'm so excited for our next guest here with us today. We have Dr. Cynthia Spence, who is an Associate Professor of Sociology at Spelman College here in Atlanta, Georgia, and the Director of the UNCF Mellon Programs. Her teaching and research interests in the areas of sociology, criminology, law, social justice, and violence against women support the law and criminology concentration in the Department of Sociology and Anthropology at Spelman. The other great thing about Dr. Spence is she is a graduate of Spelman College and earned both her master's and PhD degrees in criminal justice with a special concentration in law from Rutgers University. Dr. Spence serves as the director of the Spelman College Social Justice Fellows Program, which I've had the great pleasure and honor of working with the young women of Spelman in that program. Dr. Spence, it is so great to have you with us.
So great to have you.
Yeah, well, it's great to be here, and I'm just honored. Anytime I'm in the presence of folks associated with Gideon's Promise, I'm just really excited because of the work that you do, and it's just so very important.
Well, thank you. And so, Dr. Spence, I wanted to start off to ask you, we met because of your work as a director in the Social Justice Fellows Program. Can you tell our listening audience a little bit more about that program in your work?
Yes. Well, the Social Justice Program was created in 2011. And I had the opportunity to create this program in response to Spelman had developed this really catchy tagline, and you've probably heard it. Spelman women make a choice to change the world. We even have a song, make a choice. I mean, it's beautiful. People are singing it. And I just kept saying, but do we really, what are we doing strategically to make certain that they understand how one goes about changing the world? Spelman clearly has a history since our very beginning of community service, community engagement. But I wanted our students to be exposed to folks like you, Illy, and John, to see folks who are actually out there doing the work of changing the world. Individuals who are taking their interests in community concerns, but taking it to how do I fix this? Why is there such a great need for community service? Why is there such a great need for the community service that we offer? Certainly we will always do that, but why don't we also become actively engaged with learning how to merge our intellectual interests with our social justice passions and begin to learn more about social justice advocacy and on the grounds, kind of grassroots organizing. Who are the people, who are the movers and shakers who are doing the important work that you all are doing, as well as other social justice advocacy agencies.
Wow. Yeah. So Dr. Spence, I want to just echo Illy's enthusiasm to have you here with us on this podcast. And I'm really excited about diving in deeper and learning more about your work. But before we get more into your work, I want to ask you a question, Dr. Spence. As you know, Gideon's Promise is an organization that serves public defenders, and a lot of public defenders and people that they are in alliance with listen to this podcast. And I wonder if just sort of to start off, if I could get your thoughts about one thing. I mean, we are a year into a pandemic that has shown just how cruel society can be to those living on the margins. We are, a year into really, I would say, a national reckoning with a history of racial oppression. This is a powerful moment right now for people like you educating young folks and for young activists and advocates in the field. What would you say is the reason why public defenders are so important in this moment?
Public defenders are essential workers. They are, they've always been important. But certainly now, as we are in this moment, as you said, moment of reckoning, and some of our brothers and sisters are surprised by the unlawful use of deadly force. They're surprised by the disproportionate sentencing patterns of our criminal justice system. They're surprised by the fact that sometimes just being born poor is already planting you on a road toward criminality, or at least being criminalized by law enforcement officers and agents. And so now it's so important for us to be able to provide support, even more support, for those individuals who become entangled in the criminal justice system through various forms of discretionary decision-making that render brown and Black people much more vulnerable to criminal justice response than others. And certainly they need individuals there with them, people who can speak on their behalf, to help them give voice to their own experiences, to help others in our community understand that there are a variety of reasons why people end up in contact with the criminal justice system, that we have to engage in kind of a larger social structural analysis of what creates crime in our society, how economic insecurity that is, in fact, the response to a system that's based on capitalist ideas and the worthiness of some individuals versus other individuals to actually get a piece of the pie. Public defenders are there as the kind of intermediaries. They're the ones there, first of all, to help explain the criminal justice system to them. And then secondly, to help them tell their stories, but also to bring attention to the fact that many of the stories that they're telling, they have ended up in a place where they really don't even belong. But for the work and the activism of public defenders, these people would go unnoticed. They would be invisible. And so the work that Gideons Promise does with strengthening public defenders, transforming public defense, as your kind of tagline, these aren't just words. This is what you do. And it's the work that I hope Spelman women, who, we have tons of them going to law school, but I want them to think about being public defenders, being able to give voice to individuals who have voices, but have never been given the opportunity to express their voices.
When Illy first met you, she came home and said to me, Rap, I've got someone we have to partner with. I have to say, I'm listening to you here and I'm saying thank you, Illy, for connecting with Dr. Spence.
Dr. Spence makes you want to go and work for Gideons Promise, right?
I want you to work for Gideons Promise. I want my students to work for Gideons Promise. Look, this work is so important. And, in teaching, I don't teach as many courses as I used to. I'm teaching a women, values, and law course this semester, but I used to teach a course called Blacks in the Criminal Justice System. And it was in that course that I even learned, about the ways in which the system has been discriminatory from the very beginning of our arrival here, and the ways in which, Black labor has been used to, support this nation, but also been criminalized. So I just think it's just really important for you all to continue doing your work, but I want more people to do the work that you're doing.
So let me ask you this, because, HBCUs have always been hubs of student activism, right? From the civil rights movement of the 60s to the Black Lives Matter movement today. In what ways has the role of HBCUs in social justice work evolved? And in what ways is it still sort of, true to its rich cultural traditions of the past?
Well, we were founded, our very founding was an act of social justice, first of all. So, so we rest on social justice. Our buildings were built out of social justice, places to bring individuals together in pursuit of higher education who were not necessarily considered worthy for other institutions. Our students, throughout the history, not only of Spelman College, but all of our institutions, you can find that students and faculty have been involved in the civil rights movement and women's movements. They've been there at the forefront because we have a greater sensitivity, I think, to what it means to be a marginalized population. We have a greater sensitivity to that. Our students have always come from families that have, in fact, been affected by vast inequalities in society. But their families have made a decision and said these students must be educated because education is considered a tool. And so our students now, our Spelman women, are very much involved in, the most recently was voter advocacy. Just really attacking the narrative, first of all, that young people don't vote, but also helping to educate young people about why you vote. It's not so much a personality contest as it is about policies. Who's representing the policies that you're interested in. So our students were involved in that. But this is true for across HBCUs. Our students have also been, Spelman gets this kind of persona of, the white gloves and pearl necklaces, but, that's not who we are. I mean, clearly we're some of that, but we're also activists. And, Illy has been over to the Social Justice Residence Hall. She sees that mural.
Yes.
The mural is a centerpiece so that our women will see themselves in all the women that have come before them. So they see Anna Julia Cooper and Ida B. Wells, and, they see a Dazon Dixon Jallow, who's, a contemporary. They see Audre Lorde. They see Kimberly Crenshaw. They see women who've been involved in social justice activism, but they also see old pictures of Spelman, sisters in blackness, sisters got the hands up, saying, what, we are here, see us, and we're about the movement. I think about, the sit-ins and the Declaration of Human Rights. Those things, those were products of HBCU students. And so we have a very strong history, and we want to make certain that our students understand that they are part of a lineage. And again, I'm not just speaking from Spelman. I'm thinking about, the organizing that was occurring in Jackson, Mississippi among Tougaloo, college students, or the organizing of Bennett College women, during the sit-in. So again, we have a very rich history because we know that that's who we are, and it's our role to actually be the voice for individuals who perhaps don't have the opportunity to share their voices.
So powerful.
That mural is amazing. I always love when Dr. Spence says, hey, Illy, can you come to campus and do this or meet with the women? I love, it just inspires you, especially a person who didn't have the privilege of going to an HBCU or going to Spelman. It's just an amazing thing. So if anybody ever has the opportunity to visit, they need to do that. So Dr. Spence, you mentioned something in your earlier response about Spelman students and faculty have this greater sensitivity of what it feels like to be part of a marginalized group, right? So Spelman is both an HBCU and an all women's college. Right? So I think our listeners need to understand that part. When you mentioned all of the women that came before, how does the intersection of race and gender affect how students and faculty engaged in social justice, in the social justice space as Black women?
Yeah, I mean, it's so important, Illy, that we center our teaching, our intellectual engagement with students with the recognition that you are, in fact, you represent intersectional identities, that we can't separate your Blackness, we can't separate your womanhood, we can't separate your class, but clear the Blackness and the womanhood are right there working together all of the time. And so as you begin to ask questions about social justice, one of the first questions that you should ask, and I tell my students that, I said, no matter where you go, whenever you leave this place, when you sit in a room, I want you to look around that table and say, where are the women? Where are the women, no matter where you go? And I say that because the women's experiences have been made invisible. And certainly Black women's experiences have been made invisible. And so what we do in terms of our education, the curriculum, and certainly it's not across the board, but most faculty members in any discipline that we're teaching, we're featuring the experiences and the narratives of Black women, and Blackness being broadly defined. So not just African Americans, but we're looking at Blackness as a global phenomenon and how that has in fact informed the experiences of women. And so when we talk about social justice and students come to me and they want to do something in the criminal justice ring, one of the projects that we're doing, well, COVID has altered it, but we had a project at Whitworth Women's Correctional Institution where we were going up to Whitworth, once every 2 months, and we were involved in a book club. We said, we don't want to know what the women are in here for. We just want to engage with the women. And so we've had book clubs with Whitworth Women's Correctional Institution. Students are looking at reproductive justice issues, but I want to know how those reproductive justice issues affecting Black women and women of color. If we're going to look at immigration issues, let's talk about African immigrants and women and African refugees. So we try to center our work around the experiences of Black and brown people, not saying that anyone else's story is not important. That's not what we're saying, but we're saying that we have to give visibility to the stories that have not been told, the social justice concerns that are not actually being raised up to the top. When people are talking about even the impact of COVID-19, what's the impact on Black women? And what is it that we can do to respond?
Yeah, that is, wow. I mean, I'm sitting here listening to you and, I appreciate how privileged I am to be on the show with two powerful Black women. Gideons Promise, Illy has built an amazing executive team at Gideons Promise. 5 of the 6 members of that team are Black women. I feel like every day that I'm hanging out at Gideons Promise and being on this podcast, I continue to learn from y'all. So thank you.
There you go. Just be open. Be open.
I'm very open. I have no choice. But I love it. The next question I want to ask you, Dr. Spence, is I just think throughout history, our consciousness as a nation can ebb and flow. And I think certainly we're in a moment now, as I mentioned earlier in the program, where I think we're flowing. I think that people are really conscious right now. But I'm wondering, you've been working with students, with future leaders for a long time. And do you see student interest in social justice increasing? And what sorts of things can we do to keep that flow going?
Oh, it's definitely increasing. And as I tell the administrators over me, they need to give me more staff because these students are alive when they're thinking about social justice. They want to make a difference. And that's one of the things that we've learned about the millennial and post-millennial group. And the research even says that these kids, we may have some ways of characterizing them that, we say that they're different and that might be more in interpersonal skills. But one thing that tends to unify them is that they really see themselves as change makers.
Yes.
They want to be a part of change. And certainly, I think that we have to create opportunities for them, again, structured opportunities, so that they can actually take those interests to organizations, say like Gideons Promise of other organizations, so they understand how you fuel that passion into very strategic planning and thought work that will, in fact, end up affecting change, and also helping them to understand that change doesn't just happen, that there are processes. But the biggest thing that we can do for our students is to give them examples. so that they can, in fact, see that it's okay to be committed to this. But you have to, there's work that has to be done. And so certainly we have great interest among our Spelman women. And my task is really trying to narrow the focus sometimes and to try to attach them to people who are doing the kind of work that they want to do. And understanding that there are various ways to protest too. There are various ways. I want you out on the street, but I also want you in somebody's law office doing this work, or I want you down at the Georgia Assembly, and advocating for a legislative bill. So there are various ways that we connect those passions to real, definitive work experiences.
I really appreciate you mentioning that, change doesn't happen overnight. Change takes time. And I notice, I teach law school, and I notice with a lot of young folks, they very much want to be in the business of pushing change. But it's also really easy to get discouraged when you realize you've been working for a long time. Yeah. Change doesn't seem to be coming quickly enough. I wonder, do you have conversations with your students about that, about how being a change maker is important, but at the same time, it may not happen overnight. You've got to sustain yourself for a marathon?
Yeah, we do. And when we've been in session, we've actually even, we're doing everything virtually now, but we've even had individuals to come in to do kind of wellness and mindfulness, practices with students, because they are very frustrated about the slow movement of change. So that's one of the ways that we've done it. But again, another way that we do it is that we bring in policymakers. So we bring in individuals who are working on, they're lobbying for several issues before the Georgia General Assembly. And so I asked them to talk about, what's the history of this bill that you've been working on? And it may be something, they may have been working on for 10 years and now they see a little bit incremental movements. And so they get exposed to individuals like that. So they understand. They get exposed to Illy, who comes in and talks about her work and her journey. How did she get to where she is now? And so I think examples are very good. We are also getting ready to launch a program with the Georgia Women's Policy Institute. And you may or may not be familiar with that, but it comes out of the YWCA of Greater Atlanta. But each year they select women from throughout the metro area who are interested in learning how to legislate, learning how to lobby. And so they take them through a training process, and then the group will decide on a particular issue that they want to lobby for. And they push forth that issue. They go and meet with legislators and what have you. And so we're going to have a version of that for some of our Spelman students. Another way to actually help them understand how you move the needle. And so we try to provide as many examples as possible. But the frustration is sometimes it's actually unrealistic because, they have to learn the history. They also need to learn a little bit more about the issues that they're interested in bringing about change, because everything, I'm a sociologist too. So everything has a social and historical biography. And so that's a part of the training that we engage as well. So that's why your book would be great. They'll read your book and, and then they can learn more.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, that book. I can't believe I haven't gotten you the book.
No.
Yeah, so I'm failing on my duties.
We're going to hand deliver one this evening.
So Dr. Spence, you mentioned getting the students kind of focused. They want to change the world and then try to narrow that down. As it relates to public interest law and organizations that specialize in criminal justice reform, how do you advise your students? So they're, I'm thinking about more like the juniors and seniors now really thinking, do I go to grad school?
Yeah.
Do I get my master's? Do I go to law school? I want to do something in public interest.
Yeah.
For people who are listening, students and even professors like yourself, like students who may not have a Dr. Spence at their school, how do you advise them to pursue careers when they're thinking about pursuing careers in public interest law?
Yeah, well, first of all, we have to, explain it to them, and let them understand what it is. Their familiarity sometimes with law is watching Law and Order or Criminal Minds, and, which, are good training grounds, but we really do have to explain, the various points of entry if you're interested in the law, and then how you could actually, become a lawmaker, or a law, adjudicator, or, we have at Spelman, we push a lot of our students on to postgraduate experiences. So whether it be law school, going on to grad school, getting your PhD, or, getting into some kind of apprenticeship program in corporate America. Those are generally the areas. And then a lot of students will do things in, the social service sector as well. But what we try to do is, first of all, we want to get them into law school. And
John Marshall.
Yeah, okay.
John Marshall Law School.
Okay.
We have a lot of great Spelman students. They're amazing.
So we have to get them there to the law school, but we also need to have opportunities to expose them to what law school is like. We would love for them to have a mock law class, so that they get an experience of that. And we have to help them understand that when you go to law school, you aren't going to necessarily be studying public interest law from the get-go. That there are stages that you will go through, but depending upon what law school you go to, there may be more integration with public interest matters, depending on where the law school is. Apprenticeships, summer internship opportunities with places like Gideon's Promise, it's exposure for our students. One thing that we find is that they're almost overstimulated because particularly at Spelman, the students are sought after. And I'm not just saying that because it's Spelman, but, people know that there's a certain training that we're taking our students through. And so we have to figure out ways to help them kind of limit all of the attention that they're receiving and really focus on careers that will, in fact, yield the benefits of being able to know that you really are making a difference in someone's life. And you're making a difference in someone's life because you got that training. You're equipped to do so.
Well, I'm going to say this, whatever the secret sauce, because we always say we have secret sauce at Gideons, is how we train our public defenders. Spelman has it because we actually had and still have Spelman women who are graduates who became public defenders, right? We had Janelle Williams, who was, she was a public defender in North Georgia for a while.
Yeah.
Here, Shantae Parker.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
the chief defender.
Yes.
In Detroit, right?
Yes. Right.
On our very board of directors is Lynn Richardson, who is the chief defender of the Dallas County office, which is the largest public defender office in the state of Texas.
Yes.
And we couldn't even go through the whole list of Spelman.
I know.
Spelman grads at Gideons.
Yeah, there's more. There are more.
Sure.
At the top. So all of my Spelman public defenders, do not be mad in this name in this podcast. I swear I'll say it at a next banquet. But
we love them all. We love them all. We love them all.
But yeah, and so whatever you do, we do appreciate it, as an organization, because they all of our public defenders are hardworking, but just to have some women from Spelman in this family is also great for us and is an asset.
So I actually have a question that I'd love to run by you. In public defense, when I wanted to become a public defender, there were sort of a handful of public defender offices that people really wanted to go to that had a national reputation. Here in DC, New York, Philadelphia, and there obviously are communities in DC, New York, and Philadelphia that need good advocates. But there also are huge swaths of marginalized communities in Georgia and Mississippi and Alabama and Louisiana. And it's sometimes harder to get our graduates, people that want to do this work, to those places where maybe there's not the history of a supportive organization there. I'm wondering if you have thoughts about how we might, as educators, do a better job of inspiring our students and preparing our students to actually not just do really important work, but do it in places where historically it's been hard to get people to go.
Right. I think, again, it's exposure. that we've got to do a better job of exposing our students to these areas. And so, you're at John Marshall Law School, what kind, and I'm sure you all already do it. And so, but, models for placing first year students, at, public defender's office and, kind of getting them hooked, in that, that area, having some type of agreement where, if you intern here over the summer, you'll be guaranteed a position here. It's those kinds of really creative programs because, and then also you have, public service, with medical students. At one time, there were the public service grants where you went and worked in a certain community, then that helps you pay back your loans. So clearly, I believe that maybe there's some examples of that. I'm not sure. But for us, it's exposure. Also, identifying people who are from those areas,
Mm-hmm.
who are from those areas and wouldn't mind going back home. So And, that's what we tell some of our internship partners, that our students are from everywhere. And so you got an opportunity in California? Yeah. During the summer, she's going to be there. So or they will be there. So we how do you kind of connect students to their hometowns or areas in their, near where they are from? And so I just think that we have to be very creative because clearly you're absolutely right. Everybody wants to go to DC, Atlanta, all of that. But the work, if you're committed to the work, then we have to find ways to make these places that are less known more attractive.
Well, I'm so excited that we have this connection with you because the pipeline starts, if not sooner, it certainly starts in college. And so I'm excited that we can put our heads together to think about how we can build that pipeline from Spelman to law school to some of the places that Gideons Promise serves.
And this just takes me into, my next question about the communities that we talk about, communities that are in need of justice advocates, especially communities of color, right?
Yeah.
We've seen over the last now, this month is the anniversary of the lot, when we all shut down. Quiet,
yeah, hard to believe.
Hard to believe that we're still doing this now. And it amplified the voice of impacted communities, especially communities of color. What role do you see higher education playing in supporting in these communities?
I think that we have to make certain that our students keep the focus, even during virtual, even through this virtual engagement, we've still had students doing community service work. Okay. So some of it has been tutoring online, virtually. Many of the students are back home. So they're working with organizations in their home communities. So we, at Spelman, we believe that a part of your responsibility is to give back. That's your responsibility. And so how are you exercising that responsibility? So I think we need to just constantly engage our students in discussions about this notion of going back to that, I want to make a choice to change the world. Well, what's going to be your piece in it? What are you going to do? How are you going to contribute to making a choice to change the world? And we understand that there are baby steps and that maybe you contribute a little part to it and someone else contributes another part to it. Just as our students with the voter education and advocacy. They had Zoom calls going. They even organized rides to the polls for some who were still in the city of Atlanta. So we try to help them think creatively about how you keep it going, even when, your movement may be attenuated by something like COVID-19, but how do you keep the momentum going and learning as much as you can? We're an institution of higher education. We got to learn. We educate. That's what we do.
So Dr. Spence, last year in 2020, you and I got to do a training. I think it was in conjunction with the University of Minnesota.
Yes.
We were talking about the racial justice. Have you seen a trend in your other higher ed colleagues trying to figure out how to support students like this? Have you seen that?
Yes.
Since you've been doing
Yes. Absolutely. Okay. And on any given night, Illy, you can find some, and particularly major, predominant white institutions running some type of webinar on justice or, on law or policy. So the higher education community is responding to this moment.
Okay.
And one of the ways that they're responding is through like the event that we participated in on. The other thing that we're seeing is that we're getting a lot of requests for partnerships. People who want to be in partnership with, and I'm sure this is happening on the other campuses as well, but in partnership with HBCUs. They finally see, but we're doing something over here. We got a few, we got some graduates out there who are doing things. And so they're seeing that, this is a place that perhaps I haven't looked to before. And I want to learn more about these institutes. I want to see how we can have a partnership. What can I offer? But then what can you offer us? So it's not like they have so much to give us and we have nothing to give back. So I am seeing more momentum, among many of the institutions. Many of the major Research One institutions are really seeking ways to address issues of social justice, particularly around race. They want to do things. They want to have conversations about race.
And I think that probably goes back to what you started in this conversation about how HBCUs historically have led most of the grassroots movements began on the ground level in the colleges and universities. So that makes it's almost organic. It makes
Yeah, I was really excited about this conversation, Dr. Spence, because as you know, I think that we're obligated, those of us in this generation, to figure out how we're going to groom the next generation of social justice advocates to deal with these pressing civil rights issues. And anyone who listens to this podcast knows that I definitely think public defense is a civil rights, human rights issue. Absolutely. And when we talk about civil rights work, I urge all our listeners not to forget public defenders. But I also don't want to be greedy, and I recognize that there's lots of work that needs to be done in the in the civil rights space. I feel fortunate that we've connected with you and we've started to think about how we can help your students learn more about public defense and maybe get themselves to law schools. But also, I'm wondering if you have thoughts about how other social justice organizations in Atlanta and even beyond can most effectively engage your students, your Spelman students, and provide them with professional development opportunities so we can get them part of this next generation of change agents.
Oh, it's definitely something that's always on my mind. And there are a number of ways there, these organizations could actually share their information. They could come and be speakers, or they could, help support speakers who are doing this work. They could provide summer internships or research experiences. Most recently, one of the things that I think I've told Illy, the social justice program is totally grant funded. I mean, Spelman kicks in some, but most of it's grant funded. And so I was fortunate to be invited to write a grant recently for the Gilead Foundation. And what I did with that grant is that, and I was awarded, which was great, but I wanted to create opportunities. Yes, because more work, no. But I wanted to create opportunities for students to be able to have summer research experiences with grassroots organizations.
Oh, wow.
And so we built in enough money to fund, because I know a lot of times grassroots organizations, they might want to bring students up, but they don't have the money.
Right.
But we wrote in money to be able to fund the students. So, if I find the grassroots organization, they want one of our students and they're willing to expose the students to their work, to let them gain some research experiences and have some kind of product, we'll pay for the student to be there. And so that's how important these exposures are and experiences are for our students. And it also, John, goes back to the question that you talked about earlier about how do you get them into this lane? Well, that's the way you get them in the lane. You introduce them through their summer experiences or their semester experiences. And so that's one of the things that we're doing. And we're talking to different organizations now about their interest in hosting student researchers. And so we're really pleased to be able to offer this opportunity. But of course, if there are organizations that have their own internship program that they fund, reach out to us and let us know. And we would love to connect students, with those organizations.
It's exciting.
It's so exciting. Congratulations.
Yeah.
You awarded that great. Like you said, it's more work. But it's going to be worth it.
It's more work. And the last thing I'll say about that, which is really important, the funding at Gilead was the foundation. But the people who are sitting around the table telling Gilead, because Gilead said, we got to do something. We're in this moment. What are we going to do to respond? People sitting around that table, there was one Spelman grad and there was one Morehouse grad at the table. And that's why I said, that's full circle. That's full circle. And they didn't just say Spelman and Morehouse. They said, let's fund HBCUs. And so again, that's how all of this works.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So wrapping up with our last, question, this is the last day of Women in History Month, right? And as we talk about women and the history of women, and I want to talk past and the present. I was recently on the Prison Policy Initiative's website and saw there is a significant increase of women being incarcerated in the local and state prisons. It's a rising rate of women, especially women of color.
Yes.
What do you say to the public defenders? These are your last words, just a message to the public defenders and the advocates fighting for these women who are facing incarceration or are incarcerated. What can you say to the advocates who are fighting for them?
First of all, we've got to look at the whole person. We've got to look, because that woman represents a family in most cases. That woman represents other relationships. And so we've got to look at that. We also have got to keep our foot to the ground as public defenders. You all do is you defend people, but you also challenge the criminal justice system. And that part of your work is so important, and continue to publicize this fact that there's a disproportionate number of women of color being arrested. There's a disproportionate number of Black girls, being suspended from schools and sent to detention facilities. And so in addition to being there to defend them, to help them understand the processing of the criminal justice system, it's important to continue to push the criminal justice system to be a more fair and equitable distributor of justice. And so and it may sound lofty, but that's the role, because we have to expose what's happening. That's why we got this moment, because the exposure, all over the world, but we have to expose also what's happening to Black women in the criminal justice system. Kimberly Crenshaw says, say her name. That has to, we got to lift that up. But we have to help these women to understand that, first of all, when a woman is taken away from the family because of, gender role ideologies that we might not all embrace. But the reality is, when you disrupt that family by taking a woman away from that family, many of the responsibilities that she has assumed because of these, very narrow definitions of what women do, those go lacking. And then sometimes they're children, sometimes they're mothers that they're caring for, because women we carry really heavy loads for the community. Mm-hmm. We always have. So it's not just that one woman that's being affected. There are other people who are intimately tied to that woman. And so how do we get other social services to help pick up the slack while we're defending them? But also, how do we help the criminal justice system to engage in some introspection, some serious introspection, which I think is happening in some places. But we got to keep pushing it and keep exposing it.
Well, I want to thank you, Dr. Cynthia Neal Spence from Spelman College, for joining us. She gave me another vitamin B shot to continue this work. We appreciate you. We appreciate the women of Spelman, the faculty and the students. And so we thank you so much for joining us on this podcast today. And in true former fashion, this is Ilham Askia.
And this is Jonathan Rapping.
Wrapping it up.
Hey, Il, before we hit that outro, why don't you tell people how to order a copy of the book in your radio voice?
In my radio voice?
Yeah, in your radio voice.
Okay.
Get your copy of Gideon's Promise, a public defender movement to transform criminal justice at Amazon, IndieBound, Beacon Press, or wherever books are sold. Pre-order today, and a portion of proceeds will help us support public defenders.
Oh, that was good. That was good.
Thank you for listening to Gideon's Promise, the podcast, with Jonathan Rapping. For more information on the topics covered and featured guests, please visit our website at gideonspromise.org. And finally, please subscribe, share, and let us know what you think.